Oh, hello there, thrill seekers. Hi, I'm going to show you a golden oldie video from a talk I gave in last year at Benedictushof. And the reason I'm doing this intro to it is because the last time I did one of these golden oldie videos, it was because I was in the hospital, and I just wanted to make sure everybody knows I'm not in the hospital. My hair is all crazy and messed up. I had something that did not sit well with me last night for dinner. And I had some problems, and I'm going to spare you the details on the problems, but those kept me away from preparing the video today, and so I thought I would just find a good video from the past, which I did, and I hope you enjoy this. This is about the Samadhi of receiving and using the self, and about just following circumstances, two really important Zen lessons. So here we go. Let's see what Brad had to say back in August of 2024.
So the first thing I want to read, and maybe not talk about too much, is just this piece of writing by Dogen, which is usually called Jijuyu Zanmai, the Samadhi of receiving and using the self. And I think it's good to hear when you start practicing Zazen, especially if you're starting to do a long retreat or something. So it's not so long. It's a little bit longer than I thought. Oh, anyway, so I'll just read it to you without explaining too much. The Samadhi of receiving and using the self is the true path. It is the way of opening up to enlightenment. All of our ancestors and all of the Buddhas of the past practiced the way of upright sitting. That's what we're doing here. In India and China, those who came before us on this path have followed the way of Zazen. This is because all teachers have intimately transmitted this subtle mind. Their students have received and maintained its true spirit. It has been directly transmitted one-to-one from teacher to student. This upright sitting is the simple and sincere Buddha Dharma. It is the most supreme of the supreme. From the time you meet a teacher and begin this practice, no other practices are necessary. You do not need to burn incense, bow, chant, repeat, or read sutras. Just sit and drop off body and mind. When you practice Zazen with the whole body, speech, and mind, even for a short time, the entire universe becomes the posture of Buddha. The whole sky immediately becomes enlightenment. It enables all beings everywhere, in heaven, on earth, or even in hell, to increase their Dharma joy. This Dharma joy is their original nature. It enables all beings to be Buddhas. It renews their awakening. Together, all beings in every direction and in every realm become clear in body and mind. They realize great liberation. Their original face appears. This is all just because you do this little practice. All things together awaken to supreme enlightenment. They use the Buddha body. They immediately go beyond perfect and complete awakening. They sit upright under the Bodhi tree. They turn the great Dharma wheel. They express the ultimate profound wisdom, which is true, not false. Thus, the supreme, complete, and perfect awakening of all things returns to you when you sit Zazen. You and this awakening assist each other intimately in ways that cannot be perceived. So you can't see it. You drop off body and mind absolutely and without fail. All of your mistaken beliefs fall away. You awaken true Buddha Dharma. You universally help the Buddha work in infinite places where Buddhas practice. You widely influence all who practice. You assist all of those who go beyond Buddha. You praise and proclaim the Dharma that goes beyond Buddha. At this time, grass, trees, walls, tiles, and fences, means all inanimate objects, carry out Buddha work. Everyone and everything receives the benefit of the movement of wind and water caused by this practice of Zazen. The influence of Buddha helps them realize the enlightenment that they already possess. Although they do not perceive this, it is true. All who live and talk with you also share this virtue. They too spread and circulate this truth throughout the universe. This truth is limitless, it never ceases. It cannot be understood, it cannot be measured. However, when you are sitting zazen, you do not notice this. Your perceptions do not interfere with it. This is because this stillness is not something you have created. You directly experience the stillness that already exists. Within this stillness, you are enlightenment itself. Many believe that practice and enlightenment are two different things. They think that practice here means zazen, and enlightenment can be perceived separately. They are not two different things. Enlightenment is not associated with perception. Our human thoughts and our human feelings are deluded. They cannot reach the standard of enlightenment. Each moment you sit zazen is complete practice and complete realization. The practice continues not only during sitting, but also before and after. It is like a hammer striking emptiness. The sound continues both before and after, forever. All things show their original face. It is impossible to measure. If all of the Buddhas came together and combined all of their wisdom to try to calculate the goodness of one person sitting zazen for one moment, they could never come close. The end. So I like that, and I like to read it often during retreats because I know that sitting is difficult. I know that zazen is difficult. I know it's difficult because I've done it for many years myself. And I know that it's especially difficult to do one of these retreats because you make a commitment to sit for a lot of hours. And sometimes it feels like it's, why am I bothering? Why am I doing this thing? Why am I even making this effort? But I think the effort does something that, as Dogen says in this piece of writing, we don't perceive, we don't notice it. When I first heard this, I thought it was kind of a metaphor or a nice story, but I've come to believe it's actually true, that a few people doing zazen practice, or even one person doing zazen practice, has a big effect, but we just don't notice the effect. It's there because we're touching, as Dogen says, a stillness that is already present. So even in the noisiest situation, there is a kind of base of stillness and quiet, which we don't usually notice. It's easier to notice if you decide to come do something like we're doing this week, where we all decide to be quiet for 3 or 5 days, however you count it, 3 full days and 2 part days. Then you can notice the quiet that's already there sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to notice even when you're in this situation because the mind becomes very active. And it can often seem like the mind is becoming more active during zazen because you're being so quiet that even the little small things that come up in your mind are more noticeable. But I think it's actually a process of becoming quiet when you do zazen, and of entering into the quiet that it continues forever. It continues even before the earth was formed. There was this quiet silence, and this quiet silence is the basis of everything. So I thought of another thing I wanted to talk about, and then I want to see if you have anything you want to talk about. So I want to bring this other subject up, because I had a whole other plan to talk about it, but then last night, when we sat our first zazen, I'm sure you noticed those sirens that were going off. Right? I noticed it. And I was sitting here going, oh, did World War III start? I'm not watching the news because I'm here at Benedictus Hof doing a retreat. So maybe something happened in Ukraine or something, and now World War III is starting, and they're going to start. The Russians will start sending their nuclear warheads over here, and we back in the United States will start sending more nuclear warheads. I don't know. But then nobody did anything. Nobody got up and ran away. So I thought, maybe it's a kind of test or something that they do. I don't know what this sound is. Anyway, World War III did not start, so that was good. But it reminded me of this story that my teacher was very fond of. It's kind of an old Zen story, and it's very short. But I'll read it to you. A monk asked Master Daizui Hoshin, "They say that when the great fire at the end of a kalpa is a very, very long period of time, so long nobody even knows how long it is, millions and billions of years. When the great fire at the end of a kalpa is blazing, the great 3,000-fold world," that's the entire universe, "will be totally destroyed. I wonder whether or not this place will be destroyed." And he says this place in the translation, but it's more like this, and more like, will I be destroyed? The master says, it will be destroyed. The monk says, if that is so, we should just follow circumstances. The master says, we should just follow circumstances. So, circumstances is, I don't know, do you know the translation of the word circumstances to German? What is it?
Umstände.
Ooh, I can't even pronounce that. It kind of doesn't matter really anyway, because when I first heard this story from my teacher, I understand the word circumstances in English, but I didn't know what he meant by circumstance. It sounds so strange, just follow circumstances. But I've come to understand it to mean you follow my teacher used to also say, follow the rule of the universe. This was another way he said it. So you follow what is going on, and you find yourself in a situation. We usually think of ourselves as being separate from the situation that we find ourselves in. I always did in the past. But I think it's not true. We're part of the situation. We are an element of the situation, of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so if we fight against the circumstances, we're always going to lose. But I like this about the great fire that destroys the whole world. That's made me think of, when I was thinking World War III was going to happen. I'll read you my teacher's commentary. He wrote a little commentary about this. It says, "We should follow circumstances" is a famous saying of the Chinese master Zhao Zhao Shongzhen. I don't know if that's Joshu in Japanese. I don't know why the Chinese version is written here, but anyway. It means that we should follow the rule of the universe. Oh, there he said it. The monk seems to have had some doubt about this principle if the circumstances include the destruction of the world, the destruction of the universe. The master affirmed that we should follow circumstances even if we are on the eve of the great fire that destroys everything, like if World War III happens. The great fire represents the limits of reality. We can make our plans and efforts, but in the real world, things do not always go our way. Our plans may go awry, or we may discover that we are trying to change something that cannot be changed. The Buddhist attitude is to accept and deal with the reality of the situation, even if that reality is not one we would have chosen. This attitude is illustrated by the story of the Buddhist monk who was chased by a tiger. This is a famous old story. The monk ran as fast as he could, but he was no match for the tiger. Soon he found himself trapped between the tiger and a cliff. A little way below the top of the cliff, he noticed some vines, and with the tiger close behind, he climbed down the vines and held on. The vines were not strong enough to support his weight, and slowly they began to come loose from the side of the cliff. Just at that moment, with his support giving way and the tiger roaring angrily overhead, the monk noticed some ripe berries. He reached out and put a few of the berries in his mouth. The taste was sweet and delicious. And that's how the story ends. This is the Buddhist attitude. When the circumstances called for the monk to make a fierce effort to escape, he did so. The reality of the situation was that no escape was possible, which is basically life. The monk was able to accept this calmly. This peaceful attitude was the sweet fruit the monk was able to find even in the extreme situation. And I have a whole several pages of notes. I think I was working on writing a chapter or something about this for a book, and I never finished the chapter, but maybe I should go finish it. But I think that's a good lesson for this practice too, just like the one I brought up at the beginning, which is following circumstances. And I've done a lot of Zen retreats. Before I became a teacher of the Zen stuff, I did a lot of retreats as a student. And I usually hated them. But I felt like they were good for me, so I needed to do them. And always during a retreat, I would feel just like, oh, this is why did I do this to myself? Why did I pay money to come and do this to myself? This horrible thing. That just when it's not painful, it's boring. And I'm just deciding to do this for 3 days or whatever I'm doing it for. But I must have found it valuable because I kept doing it again and again. And now I find myself doing this, and this is another example of following circumstances. Because it was not, I didn't start doing Zen practice with the intention of becoming a teacher of it. I had no desire to become a teacher. I had no interest in that sort of thing. I just found the practice useful, and it was very helpful in my day-to-day life, in the various jobs I had, and other things. So I kept doing it. And once I got to Japan and I'd practiced with my teacher Nishijima Roshi for several years, he asked me to be a teacher in his lineage, which I tried to refuse, but I couldn't refuse. He kind of forced me into this situation. He was very sneaky. He told me, "Oh, I'm very old." He's Japanese. "I'm very old, and teaching these Zazen classes every week in English is very difficult for me now because I'm so old. Would you mind?" Because he gave me this teaching, permission to teach. "Would you mind taking over the classes?" And I thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take over these Zazen classes. I didn't feel like I was qualified to do it. I didn't have any interest in doing it. But it's so hard to refuse this, kind old man who's been teaching me Zen for so many years. So I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And after I'd done that for a few months, he said, "Well, those retreats that I do once a year in English? I'm very tired and old, and it's hard to do these retreats in English. Would you mind teaching the retreats?" And that was the worst, because I really didn't want to teach the retreats, because that's a lot of work. But again, I was sort of forced into doing it. And all of that led to a lot of things. I wrote this book about it, Hardcore Zen, and I didn't expect that book to sell very well. In fact, I was just thinking the other day, I was working for a company in Japan called Tsuburaya Productions, and I put the name of the company I worked for in the book and some details about the company. And I wasn't worried that they would ever find it, because I thought this book will sell 20 copies and nobody will ever know it even exists. That's how confident I was that that I wouldn't that this book would would not lead to anything. I really didn't think it would lead to anything. So then a few years later, when I wrote the second book, I changed the name of the company. So people are sometimes confused if they read Hardcore Zen and then sit down and shut up, because in Hardcore Zen, the company I work for is called Tsuburaya Productions, and in Sit Down and Shut Up, I called it Marutani Productions, which is a little play. In Japanese, the characters can be pronounced multiple ways, and you could pronounce the name of the... A lot of people thought the company was called Marutani Productions because there's 2 ways to pronounce those characters. Anyway, it's a long story. But I was really confident it wouldn't succeed. And it led to this whole thing of teaching, which keeps getting more and more. And I keep hoping, one day it'll stop and I won't have to do this anymore. It's not that I don't hate doing it. It's fine. I don't dislike it. It's okay. It's an okay job, but it's not the job I would have chosen. Sometimes I regret. I had a chance, I think in 2009 or 10, I can't remember which year, Tsuburaya Productions, I'd been kind of halfway working for them for a little while, but not full time. And then they asked me to come back. They asked me if I would just move to Japan and come back and work for the company again, because at that point I was living in Los Angeles and doing kind of part-time work for them. And I had to think about it a lot, and I decided that I should keep up this Zen teaching thing. To me, it was a matter of just following circumstances, of seeing the circumstance I was in and seeing that there was this kind of important thing that I felt needed to be done, and maybe I could do it, but I still have the feeling like, should be somebody better doing this, and I apologize that there's not somebody better doing it for you, and you just have to stick with me for this week. But I'll try my best to make it a little better.